When I first started the Full Sail EMDT program, I wasn't sure what my journey was going to be like this year, but I was extremely excited to get started. In Course 1, Media Literacy and Research Technology, not only did we choose our year-long capstone action research topic, but we also had a refresher course in writing, where it was APA formatting or the highway. This introduction course was very beneficial because it really kept me on my toes throughout the whole year whenever we had a formal writing assignment. When it was time to choose a big idea, I chose a topic that was familiar to me: motivation and engagement. I began by asking myself what would happen if I took on a more proactive role in my career and ventured into taking more risks through the use of technology and creativity. Would my students become more engaged and motivated to learn? If my students were intrigued by these new innovative lessons and became more motivated and engaged in learning, would it immediately result in less behavior problems in my classroom? Before beginning any of my research, I had to figure out what the needs of my target audience, or my students, were by using the survey that I created in Course 3, Training and Motivational Development. This was the greatest resource for me. The results of the survey determined what types of technology or materials I needed to use in my research in order to promote motivation and engagement. According to Armstrong, 2009, when teachers connected with students by knowing what and how to teach, learning occurred. When looking at my school, I noticed that there are many students who are not actively engaged in their learning, and I wanted things to change. This continuous lack of motivation and lack of engagement seems to be creating instances where students are acting out and causing problems instead of learning the necessary content standards that they need to be proficient in for their grade level, thus increasing the number of students that are below grade level each year. My passion is teaching, helping children achieve goals, giving children the opportunity to better themselves, giving children the tools they need to be successful later in life. If we, the teachers, are to make any positive impact on student learning and prepare our students to enter the 21st century society, we need to close the opportunity gap, socially, technologically, and academically speaking. There needs to be some sort of solution that can help students increase their levels of motivation and engagement with their academic work.
I like to write stories more using story jumper and use my imagination.
The purpose of my research was to see if I could be motivated and engaged in trying to change the way that I had been delivering lessons to incorporate 21st century technologies, to see if my students would become more motivated and engaged in their learning process. I wanted to see what would happen when creative and technologically advanced lessons were delivered to my students in order to capture their attention and keep them motivated, hopefully resulting in more engagement and motivation, making students happier and less disruptive. This boost in motivation and engagement will then create more successful opportunities for student growth. For example, higher test scores, positive behaviors, and a lifelong passion for learning. Before implementing my AR project, I researched various articles surrounding motivation and engagement with the use of technology within a learning environment. I found that many of the articles pertain to my interest in research. For instance, Lee and Spires, 2009, noted that students wanted their experiences with technology within the classroom to resemble what they had outside of school. Additionally, students wanted to use technology in a way that was more meaningful to them. Lee and Spires, 2009. It was clear that productive learning was directly affected by motivation, dedication to the task at hand, achievement, and self-efficacy. Hoffman and Nadelson, 2009. Now, I know from personal experience that technology is always changing and improving, so it can be hard to stay current and up to date, but this shouldn't be the reason that technology is left out of the classroom. To further support, Spires, Lee, Turner, and Johnson, 2008, also found that it was difficult for teachers to keep up with the times. The results highlighted the fact that students used computers more at home than at school, which exemplified a different demand for the way technology needed to be used in schools. Spires et al., 2008. This research motivated me to include technology, not only in the classroom for in-class instruction and assignments, but also at home for homework. The most important information that I found while researching was when Considine, Horton, and Moorman, 2009, found that students lived in an environment where reading and writing were taught through digital media, which challenged teachers to connect literacy skills that were developed in their social environment to their academic environment. It then dawned on me that I needed to be the one to help bridge the gap between academia and 21st century technology, because ultimately, students would continue to enter formal education environments and would be disadvantaged because schools placed heavy restrictions on internet use, which resulted in a failure to bridge the gap between the technological world and the classrooms they were expected to learn in. Considine, Horton, and Moorman, 2009. In Course 11, Media Asset Creation, I began my leadership project where I had to figure out how I could contribute to a body of literature. I chose to submit my article to an online journal entitled Language Learning and Technology because I teach students who are English learners. This journal is perfect because not only can I tell my story and share my research, but I can tell it to an audience that has the same interest and same type of students that I have. It's very important to me to be able to reach and impact these types of students because, and this is solely based on my own classroom experiences, these are the students who struggle with maintaining motivation and learning academic content on a daily basis. As my research began, I gave my target audience a pre-survey so that I could get an idea of what needs and wants were important to them in order for them to be motivated and engaged in their learning process. As soon as winter break ended in January, I began introducing Story Jumper to my target audience. It was clear that students were highly interested in this new program, so I began giving homework assignments using the Story Jumper planning pages. During Course 5, Education Design and Evaluation, I created various media assets to use during each cycle. These media assets were extremely important to my research because they allowed the target audience to stay organized while providing visuals and tutorials for scaffolding and guidance. Throughout the whole implementation process, my main goal was to be as successful as Gobel, 2009, who stated that positive learning results occurred when students completed activities and assignments that complemented a student's way of learning. So that's how I allowed my students to flourish. I let them decide what kind of activities would complement their style of learning. During Cycle 1, I wasn't able to use the rubrics for grading purposes because my kids were still trying to figure out how to use Story Jumper, but once Cycle 2 came around, the rubric was in full effect. The Story Jumper planning pages that I assigned for homework were a huge success. These documents allowed my students to feel comfortable and confident in their writing. Once students completed a planner page, they used Story Jumper during our computer lab time to type it up, illustrate using digital images, and publish their storybooks. I began Cycle 2 by weaning my students off of relying on the teacher for support so they would become more independent learners. Surprisingly enough, my students had already adjusted to the Story Jumper routines and expectations, and it was like I was dealing with a different set of students. Since my students were adapting really well to Cycle 2, I had to modify the student homework packets so that the packets would be beneficial to their learning, rather than repetitive, mindless work. In order for students to use the computer lab, they had to correctly fill out this planning page. Since the rubric was attached to the homework packet, students had easy access to it, and they used it as a guide to help them with their writing. By the time we had the computer lab time, if students weren't done, they had to use that time to complete their assignment. However, if students were finished, they could begin their online publishing process. After some of the storybooks were finished, I was able to use the skills I learned in Course 8, Filmmaking Principles in Education, to create short films and completed storybooks using the student author as the narrator. Throughout both cycles, my main hope was that students would develop the confidence and skills to become more efficient with their time and independent with their writing skills. The Story Jumper planning page, as well as the in-class silly song game that I created in Course 9, Game Strategies and Motivation, allowed for both of these concepts to be touched upon. From the moment I introduced Story Jumper to the last day in the computer lab, 2 words came to mind: motivated and engaged. In the end, more students ended up turning in their homework on time, and as a whole, in-class participation increased, and more students were focused on their own work and could work for longer periods of time. Overall, I would deem this as a complete success. Now that my AR project has come to a finish, I've decided to continue implementing and incorporating technology into my daily practice and learning environment. I will not conduct research cycles, but I will modify accordingly and adapt to my new target audience this upcoming school year. I am also proud to say that I am on the New Technology Committee at my school, and I will be delivering a presentation to my entire staff about my year-long research on how to incorporate technology to help promote and foster motivation and engagement into a learning environment. Lastly, I will also be offering training sessions for any teacher that would like to begin incorporating StoryJumper.com or any other form of technology that I can help out with into their classroom. I'm not officially our technology resource teacher, but I'm happy to say that it could be a possibility in my future.